Florida cop points a gun at a traumatized toddler and mother. So sad. Put it up full mask. This is a hell of a story. So police in Florida are under fire after viral images shows a cop pointing a gun at a traumatized toddler and a mother. This agency, or the police, they've issued a response. So a police department in Florida is facing intense backlash from their community after an image went viral that showed a toddler lying on the ground with her hands behind her back, while an officer facing her has his gun drawn. So here's what happened. Authorities said they responded to a 911 call on March 4th, about a disturbance involving a gun at a local market. According to the police, one of the store employees got into a fight with a 29-year-old man identified as Godfrey Hercules II, who pulled out a weapon during the altercation. He never fired the weapon during the altercation and left the scene in a car with his girlfriend, 27-year-old Maria Banks, and her 37-year-old daughter. Dispatchers, alerted police in the area to look out for the vehicle Hercules was driving. Shortly after, officers caught up with Hercules after he stopped at a building housing a veterans organization and got out of the car with Banks and her child. Police apprehended Hercules without incident. And body camera footage shows when police officers encountered Banks and the child and shouted orders to get on the ground. The moment Banks got on the ground, her 3-year-old daughter mimicked her actions, lay on the ground and put her hands behind her back. Banks was handcuffed and detained as police placed her in the back of the police vehicle. Her child is heard nearby on body cam telling the officers, quote, "Don't kill us. I'm not, I promise," an officer says. "I promise I won't," an officer responds. In a news release, police said, quote, "Officers responded with an appropriate level of caution with the understanding there was a weapon involved seeking to resolve the situation." Quote, "When approaching Hercules and Banks, officers could not have known who was in possession of the firearm," the release read. Quote, "As soon as the officer approaching Banks became aware of the presence of the child, he immediately pointed his firearm toward the ground at a low, ready position. At no point was the officer's weapon pointed at the child as confirmed by multiple cameras." End quote. Let's put it up. So video was taken by bystanders show officers' firearms from an angle that appears to be pointed at the mother and child while they are on the ground. Those images are what set off a firestorm on social media, leading police to swiftly release body cam footage showing the weapon pointed toward the ground. And a statue in front of the police department features an officer holding a child's hand, as you can see. The department's chief issued a statement as well. Put them up. So the statement from an Atlanta Black Star was able to get this. During a news conference, Winter Haven police chief, his name is Vance Monroe, worked to ease tensions with the community after images of the detainment scene went viral. Quote, "The optics are terrible," Monroe said, calling the incident heartbreaking. Quote, "I truly wish that this child was not exposed to this." He asserted that officers only ordered Banks to get on the ground because they were unsure whether she was carrying a firearm. Police found a semi-automatic pistol in Hercules' car. Banks was released without arrest. Hercules was later released from police custody after the store employee he fought with decided not to press any charges. However, a complaint was filed against both men, citing them for affray, also known as fighting in a public setting. It's mutual combat typically in a public setting is what it is. All right. Let's go to the thing that to me is the standout. And I understand that people saw that imagery and got upset. I'm upset as well. That imagery is horrible. It's horrible. You know what else is horrible? Probably even more so, that a toddler, the first response of the toddler is to say to the police, don't kill us. That part, where does that come from? Well, that comes from the culture. That comes from the culture of policing. That comes from so many police officers getting away with killing individuals who are unarmed. I mean, this is a toddler who says, don't kill us. When I was a child, that wasn't the first thought that came into my mind, and many of you can echo the same. But it is a different reality today. And because of the access to information, we know that these police departments have engaged in such a culture of corruption that the culture has permeated to the youngest amongst us to have that first response, the first reaction as don't kill us. All right. Yasmin, thoughts here?
Yeah, the same thing stood out to me. And really, that statue of the cop
Yeah.
shaking a child's hand is pretty interesting. It's propaganda and it's not working. If the goal was to let children and parents and members of a community know by erecting that statue that these cops are working on their behalf, or that these cops are gentle and not scary and not dangerous, and that they are actually there to serve and protect and not to antagonize a local population, it is not working if a toddler is on the ground begging a cop not to kill her. If the cops acted in a way that they were supposed to in this particular instance, that is a good thing. I guess we'll get more information on that as more details come out. But from what we can see, either way, there was an altercation. The cops had to respond to it. That is their job to do. But the child is a toddler. So what is that, like 2, 3 years old? And they still are so aware that this man has a deadly weapon in his hand. It's not, maybe it wasn't pointed at the child at that point, but it was around and it was in the hand. And that cop knew how, or that child knew how easy it is for that cop to turn that weapon on either the child or their mother and say, and that would be it for the child. What would happen at that point? The mother would be dead, and then worst case scenario, the father would be in jail or something like that, and then the kid would go into a system. So these incidents take minutes to play out, but they can have very, very long term and detrimental effects on entire families and on a child's life. Right? This child is just barely was born a couple years ago, and it's the whole life is now tainted by this interaction.
Yeah, well said.